The eyes are on the Jersey Shore. I am at my home office in Toms River, and I am with today Dr. Ramon Solhkhah, the Chair of Psychiatry at Jersey Shore University Medical Center, who is right now on the Death Star to talk about COVID trends in terms of that mental burnout that we're all feeling. The COVID pandemic has certainly hit all of us in a lot of different ways, in one way or another. And it's certainly a year plus into the pandemic. We're all looking forward to that one day where we don't have to wear the mask. We're not as focused on, the social distancing and stuff like that. So Dr. Solhkhah is going to kind of walk us through some of what's going on right now, that fear, that anxiety, and how we can kind of go through, deal with what's going on right now and look forward to that one day ahead. So Dr. Solhkhah, welcome from wherever you are.
Very glad to be here, Vin. I'm in my home office in beautiful Neptune City, so not too far away from you.
So a galaxy close by.
Exactly.
Okay, so, a year plus into this, certainly a year back at this point, there was a lot of questions, not many answers. Okay, what's going on? How does this spread? We got to be home, can't go to school or, to work in some cases, or to church or to the store, and then kind of, okay, where do a year plus now, we certainly have some more answers on that. We can go out a little bit. There are some restrictions with mask and social distancing and everything as well. But I think, at this point, people are still kind of feeling that COVID burnout, that drain of anxiety kind of, okay, well, what do I do now? Either it's frustration over not being able to get vaccinated, frustration maybe over not the answers they're looking for about the pandemic. So still some of that fear and anxiety about, for some people, maybe about even just going out and doing something, is going grocery shopping and everything. So even now, how can people deal with that? Maybe that battle of all these different kind of emotions playing on here and trying to mentally battle through the COVID pandemic.
Sure. So, and thanks for having me, Ben. And I think it's such a crucially important topic. And like you said, who thought a year ago that we'd still be talking about it in this way? And both the positive that the vaccines have come around so quickly, but also the fact that it's still a year plus of now being quarantined and dealing with that. And I sort of would think of this in two different ways. So one of which is just the fact of all of us dealing with the quarantine. And, what we've done is we've looked at the scientific literature around quarantining. And, this is, of course, made famous, right, by Jack Nicholson and, The Shining, right, going stir crazy from being, in isolation. Right. And I think that's what a lot of us have been experiencing. And so I think part of it is to remember that it's normal. And, that's what we all should be going through with this phase. And, we look at the experiences with scientists down in the Antarctic. So at McMurdo Station, astronauts on the space station. And, one of my favorite references, Biosphere 2, made famous by the movie with Pauly Shore and Biodome. When folks are in isolation, and then there's what we typically call the third quarter phenomenon. So as people are sort of through most of it, right, and we start seeing it, the light at the end of the tunnel, that's when people are actually at their most vulnerable. And so if you think of the sports analogy, right, it's when teams crash in that fourth quarter, that's sort of the same thing, right? You think the game's done, it's over. But the reality is you still got a ways to go here. And so you need to have your resources and marshal them. So, I think that's part of it. And we know that from those experiences, people get irritable. People get, short fuses with each other. I don't know about everyone else, but Zoom fatigue, and dealing with, Zoom meeting after Zoom meeting has certainly fried most of us. And that lack of human interaction. Humans are social, beings, and we need the nonverbal communication. We need the body language in order to really feel comfortable. And so dealing in, two dimensions here has challenged most of us. And so, if you find yourself getting testy with your colleagues on Zoom calls or, your family when you're doing them, I think that's also part of it. The more important thing, and the one that I, as a psychiatrist, I really worry about, is that people are really experiencing a lot of stress as a result of the pandemic, the quarantine, the economic impacts, the frustration. We're used to, for most of us, going out into the world, right? So we leave our house, we commute, we get to work, we've got our work friends, but then we get to leave them, go home, right? So we don't have to deal with the same group of people for 24/7, 365, which for many of us now, we're living with and working with our spouses or significant others. We've got to, in between become teachers and help homeschool kids. So all of that stress is just really compounding, and people are truly stressed. And we've seen in our mental health services, even in the worst of COVID, that our numbers remain pretty consistent. And for about the past 6 months, we've really seen a dramatic increase in presentation of people in crisis, in our emergency rooms, in our outpatient services, just being, more stressed, more depressed, more anxious. So I think it's something that, again, we all have to acknowledge exists and then get help. And I think that there was a lot of reluctance to going back to the healthcare setting because of COVID. And it's certainly something that we really are reinforcing with people. Come back to the hospital, get your, get your medical care, get your mental health care, because it is safe to do so. And the consequences of not seeking out care now, that's going to be cumulative.
Now, whether people are still working all remotely, all from home, or kind of doing a half and a half because maybe they got kids at home that they aren't fully back in school, or maybe just young kids, toddlers, infants and whatever, where they kind of have to be at home, at least for now. For the parents out there with kids and trying to balance that family and that work life with trying to make sure that everybody's taken care of and that they could still get their work done as well. Is there any tips that you have, any pieces of advice that can kind of help them either take those mental breaks or take those, physical breaks, just step away from the computer, or, just kind of step outside or something like that, just to give for, a half hour just for themselves or something like that, where they can kind of hit the recharge button or reset the button a couple times a day or something?
So I think a couple of tips I could suggest.
Sure.
One is keep your routines. Right. So getting up in the morning at a regular regular wake time, keeping a regular bedtime, making sure you're showering, getting dressed, all of those sorts of things. Right. We all joke about, sweatpants and other things, but, being dressed to go to work. I think those routines are important and help us, sort of prioritize what we're doing and keep our brain focused on the task at hand. Right. When we're at home, we should be at home. When we're working, we should be working. I think along that line, having a dedicated workspace. So one of the things that I hear a lot is people, basically that dining room table becomes everyone's school, workplace, home place, everything. And that's probably not so healthy. So trying to have distinct spaces for work and then home help us transition as we move through it. It's become very easy for us to extend our work days and be getting on meetings earlier because we're not commuting. So, why not get on that earlier call, and likewise to go a little bit later into the day. And I think still having those distinct spaces is really critical for mental health and mental well-being. I think one other thing, and so we joked about, my background here, right? But I think a little bit of whimsy, a little bit of things that are fun. So I'm a Star Trek, oh my God, Star Wars nerd. I'm going to have people throwing things. You can be both, but, there's definitely purists among the group. So, but, whatever your hobbies are and your recreational things, you should absolutely be doing those. Make sure you're spending time listening to music, reading. Obviously, a lot of our pleasurable activities, a lot of our things that we did to de-stress, going to movies, going out to restaurants, going to a bar or nightclub, those sorts of activities are not available to us. So, try and find others. And then the last thing, which you hit the nail on the head, is, physical activity. So getting out, walking, even if you're socially distanced, even if you're, wearing a mask, you can still go for a walk, go for a run, spend some time at the playground when, other kids are not there, so that you've got, again, the physical distancing. So getting out into nature, I think, is really an important part, getting some fresh air, all of those things really critically important.
I know a lot of kids, out there, especially, as it's gotten warmer here this year, go out in the yard or out in the street and play with some friends and everything. But for kids out there, I mean, certainly when I was 8, 9, 10 years old, I didn't have a piece of technology in my hand, let alone a computer to do school. Who knows what would have happened, 20 years ago when I was that age. But for the kids out there, either struggling with remote learning, with the computer, not having that social interaction with their friends and their classmates and their teachers on a regular basis, or maybe for a variety of different reasons, maybe they haven't been able to physically see certain friends or certain family members over the last year. Some ways that kids can kind of cope with that. I mean, certainly with everything that they got going on as well, trying to deal with all those emotions and trying to process all those feelings, and especially the younger they are, understand what's going on and maybe why they can't see their certain family members or friends, or why they can't go to school, and kind of getting frustrated maybe with some of the remote learning because they're used to having a pencil in hand and writing stuff down on their desk.
Yeah, and throw in, chalkboards and whiteboards and all of that, right? Which many of us don't have in our house, and so it really has changed the learning environment. And I think you have to use your judgment in terms of how much information you want to give kids around some of this, because on the one hand, clearly there's a safety issue. There's a focus on the bad news. So certainly my major advice is don't watch the news, and don't let your kids watch the news, right? Be focused on family activities and books and popping in a movie rather than watching the news, because all the constant death tolls and things like that can certainly be stressful for kids. I think you have to also keep in mind whether we're talking about teens or younger kids. So teens are obviously very well aware of what's going on in the world, and
right.
The focus for them. Certainly, I'd encourage everyone, down to the age of 16 should be vaccinated. It's a gift we have to live in a time with modern science where we can actually benefit from that and not have to go through the scourge of the Black Death or the influenza pandemic. So I think we should take advantage of those, and the vaccines are very safe and very well tolerated, at least by studies into kids at the age of 16. There are trials underway for kids under that age, so we'll see eventually. I think where the danger is where you've got multi-generational families living together, so that you've got your parents, your elderly parents, yourself and your spouse or partner, and then your younger kids. And when the kids start playing with each other or hanging out with each other, the risk that they could transmit it to that older family member is still a risk. And so until everyone is completely vaccinated, that's just one thing to definitely keep in the back of your head. But I think keep the circles of friends as close as you can. So I know a lot of families were working in sort of extended, pods where it's a group of, 2 or 3 families whose kids could hang out together, and they were all committed to not, hanging out with other people. So the risk of contamination and infection was minimal. So there are lots of creative ways to do that. I know lots of younger people, this is, as the weather gets a little bit nice, you start thinking of, some outdoor sports and things like that, which are probably safer than indoor sports. So being out again and doing those sorts of things again with as much physical distancing as you can, I think that's the recipe for success at this point.
Now, I mean, throughout the pandemic for anybody really, I mean, we could even hit on now, and to use a Simpsons reference, because I know you and I are big fans of that show, sort of like being, there's rules. Okay, so there's rules everywhere. Mom and dad have rules when you're growing up in the house. There's rules at school, rules at work, rules wherever you go, kind of like these things that you have to do. But I don't think anybody's really used to or gotten used to being, told to either stay inside or do this or do that for over a year's worth of time here. So it kind of made me think of, like a Bart Simpson being sentenced to his room saying, you can't go out, you can't go to that concert tonight. And then they find out that he did. But it being told that you got to be in that confined space, or being told that you have to do certain things for a certain period of time that are uncomfortable. And it's not a matter of whether what's right or what's not right, just kind of trying to process things mentally, or getting used to something that you're not used to doing. Maybe it's uncomfortable. Maybe people are uncomfortable wearing the mask or being socially distant or being far apart in this and that. So what are some ways that people can try to, I guess, grin and bear it, or kind of hang on there, do what you got to do for now and try to look forward to that light at the end of the tunnel one day, where you won't need to be under as many restrictions as perhaps you are now?
Yeah, I think there are two parts to that question. So one is, I think, to the extent possible, you want to keep the routines for kids that they can So the things that they were doing, whether it's within school, within their friends, with the transition to virtual perhaps, but, keeping the Boy Scout meetings or the Girl Scout meetings or the, clubs and doing those sorts of things. I've seen coaches doing, these Zoom classes with, 8, 10, 12 kids and just working through fundamentals where everyone is just practicing their fundamental skills. So I think there are ways to modify some of that. May not be as ideal as in person that we were all used to, but it's better than nothing. So I think that that's certainly part of it. I think the other part is, to the extent possible, using the social networks that the kids already have is really critical, right? So, pre-COVID, I probably would have been someone who would have said, you want to minimize your kids' video game time and don't let them, play games with their kids, right? But that's a natural way that kids can socialize, right, and they feel comfortable in doing that. And so again, it's as long as there's reasonable time restraints on it, I think that's a reasonable, gap measure here while we're all trying to sort this out. Again, one of the important skills we do want to teach our kids is what we call self-soothing or self-regulation. And, Vin, what you were saying, right? When we were kids, we didn't have the computer. We had to go out in the backyard and grab a stick and make a game up or do something. And that, right, fostered our creativity, but also taught us to be comfortable being by ourselves or with one other friend. We didn't need a circle of 20 people around us in order for it to be an event. And so I think kids need to reclaim some of those fundamentals, just screwing around in the backyard, doing some of those things, right? Those are really helpful life events. And it's my own personal belief. So there's not a really robust scientific evidence here, but over the past 10, 15 years, what we've seen is a gradual increasing of what we call the diseases of despair, that people have, we've seen the rates of depression go up, suicidal thinking, particularly around teens and young adults. We've seen, the opioid epidemic decimate the Jersey Shore and decimate New Jersey. And I personally believe that part of that is because of the disconnection we've had over the past decade with social media and the notion that Facebook friends equal real friends. And that's not completely the case. And it's not a one-for-one transfer there. So I think having real world experiences, having experiences that, you're walking barefoot in the grass, touching the water, playing in the sand, all of those things I think are really critical for brain development, particularly because this year we've lost a lot of the school learning that these kids would have had because it's just been such a herky-jerky sort of, spit and start. Some schools closed, they transition to video for a week, then they go back to in-person. It's just, I think we're going to see a little bit of a cognitive piece here that kids are going to have lost a little bit. So let's try and make up for it in these other ways and making sure that kids' brains are expanding and growing the way that they're supposed to.
Now, just for everybody, as we move forward, certainly with the rate of transmission down below 1 and things heading in a positive direction, slowly but surely, more people are starting to get vaccinated as doses come into the state and to the shore and everything as well. But as we hope and pray and push for that day where, there's not as many restrictions, we can, safely go out and about to the beach or to the park or to the store, wherever, and have some semblance of normalcy there. What can people do to try and just hold on and grin and bear it, not look too far ahead, but not kind of live too much in the moment there and kind of get frustrated because things aren't moving as quickly as some people would like, where, they'd like, for right now, where you can go out, no mask, no social distancing, no, capacity limits or anything. You can go and do what you got to do, but just be safe and respectful of others. So how do we live in that moment with knowing what, that there is some good that lies ahead, but trying to process, what we still got to do on a daily basis without losing track of time or getting too frustrated with everything that's around us?
Right. So, I think I've got a little bit of a flippant answer, right? Which is, how do you eat an elephant, right? One bite at a time. And so I think that for most people, you don't want to be thinking 6 weeks out, 12 weeks out, what am I going to be doing? I think you want to keep it to very manageable. What am I doing today? What am I doing tomorrow? What am I doing this weekend? So keep it the timeline should be much shorter than we normally would do. I know lots of families have these calendars where they're booked out, for months and months in advance in terms of social events, school plays, sporting events, whatever. And I think, keep our realistic focus on a much shorter time period. I think that's easier for kids to understand also right now, because, the whole sense of what day is it, what month is it? It's a little blurry for everyone. So, keep it focused in terms of short pieces here. I think one important piece, particularly for parents and adults that we're talking about, avoid dangerous coping mechanisms, right? So I've seen people increase their smoking because they're a little bit more stressed and anxious. I've seen people increase their drinking, increasing drug use. So you want to avoid those unhealthy coping mechanisms and focus on healthy coping mechanisms. The other phenomenon we've seen is a lot of grazing during the day, right? You're working at home, the kitchen is right there, so every time you walk by to get some water, you grab a cookie, you do this, you do that. And so, keeping a sense of a regular diet, eating a little bit healthy, right? And those sorts of things. Because I think in any stressful environment, good sleep, good appetite, and good food help you and your body fuel through any of those challenges, right? That's what we need to overcome all of that. So I'd say that's the other piece that's really critical. And then the last piece is, to the extent that it's possible, have structure. So, have the kids in school from their time to their time, then it's school's out, right? So go play, go run around the backyard, go do those activities. Then you come back. Homework time is when homework time was supposed to be. Video game time is when video game time is supposed to be. Family time is when family time was supposed to be. So that you keep those routines, because that's also really helpful. Human beings tend to rely on routines. It's how we do measure time internally. So that's the way that we'll get through this also.
And to close out here, I know I guess it seems maybe like a simple question here, but whether it's a lot on your mind or not much on your mind, or you have a lot or a little going, I don't like to, I guess, to quantify or qualify certainly what somebody's going through, or make it better or worse than somebody else, because I think everybody has their own struggles with whatever is going on in their life here. But how important is it to reach out to help, for help, whether it's family, friends, a doctor, even just sitting down in the park and having a conversation with somebody to kind of air out any frustrations or anxiety, or even pass along happy thoughts that you're trying to look for somebody to share something positive with as well. So how important is it to have those conversations, and what is your advice to people who are kind of bottling up all those emotions, right now during this pandemic?
Yeah, don't. I think it's extremely important to not bottle up and to not, this is a marathon, not a sprint, right? So it's already been a year. God knows how much longer it's going to be. So I think you've got to pace yourself to make sure that you're not going to reach your limit. So venting off some of that steam and pressure is critical to all of us in our general mental health and mental well-being. So whatever you can do to keep those situations, so I've got a weekly Zoom chat that I have with a group of my friends. And so, every Friday evening we all get together and vent about our week, and we've known each other for a while. We probably would be doing that, over dinner or over a bar, but we're making do with this so that we at least still have that connection to be able to process. So I think those sorts of scenarios are definitely helpful. And whether that's with your family, friends, we've still got the telephone, right? So everything doesn't have to be Zoom. So you can certainly just pick up the phone and call people and connect with them that way. And then to the extent possible, I think whatever activities that you would normally do to help yourself deal with stress, right? So whether that's working out, whether that's, reading, whether that's listening to music, whether that's macrame, do those things to the extent that you're able to. It's a way for your mind to sort of decompress itself as well, and let your sort of, rather than the constant struggle of thinking about things, just let your mind wander and go through that process, right? It's what we call mindfulness, just being in the moment and doing that thing that you're doing.
Dr. Solhkhah, thanks.
I'm sorry, Ben. One before I cut you off, just before we wrap up, you know, you asked about reaching out to professionals, and I do want to reinforce that is absolutely critically important. So, if you notice that you know that bad mood, that irritability, the depression, the stress are persisting longer than they normally would, right? So everyone has a bad day, that's to be expected, but you notice that the days are you know sort of accumulating, and it's now gone to being a bad week and a bad month, then you probably should be reaching out for professional help. So talking with your primary care physician, which most of them are able to do Zoom, you know, telemedicine type visits, and so you can check in and chat with them. If not, we're in business, you know, we're open. We have our mental health services available, so you can also reach out there, and you know, you can go to our hospital websites and can always check in and get information there as well.
Thank you for adding that in. That's I think that's very important to relay those services and let people know what's out there, so that they can, you know, reach out for help and for some advice on how to go through what they're going through.
Yep, absolutely.
Dr. Solhkhah, thanks for taking out some time to talk about where we've been, certainly where we are now, where we could be in terms of everything going on, the mental struggles of the COVID pandemic with whatever people are going through right now, whether it's the sickness itself or just kind of dealing with a new world, digital world, remote world, just kind of living in a world of a lot of different rules and restrictions for health and safety reasons, certainly, of course, but just trying to deal with a whole bunch of different emotions that maybe some people haven't experienced before. So I appreciate you taking out the time and offering up some advice and ways for people to kind of cope with all this.
Oh, it's my pleasure, and thank you for your focus on this and for getting the word out to our community.
My pleasure. That is Dr. Ramon Solhkhah, the Chair of Psychiatry at Jersey Shore University Medical Center, part of the Hackensack Meridian Health Group in New Jersey and at the Jersey Shore. Thanks for watching another episode of Eyes on the Jersey Shore. I am Vin Ebenau. Stay safe out there, stay well, and take care of one another.
Bye, everyone.